Welcome back to Inside The Rink Podcast. Tonight we will discuss the winners and the losers of the 2026 trade deadline. Did we just witness the game of the year and a lot more? But first, let me welcome in my co-host tonight, Aaron. Aaron, you ready to talk some hockey?
What's up, Chris? Glad to be here. Yeah, always ready to talk some puck.
Well, on Friday we had the NHL Trade Deadline, and I figured everybody talks about all the trades and everybody's heard about the trades over the weekend. So on Monday, why be repetitive of what everybody else has done? Let's try something different. And so we decided we're going to do our winners and our losers from the trade deadline. And I'll go first. And my first winner was the Minnesota Wild. This team went out and they added Nick Foligno, Bobby Brink, Jeff Petrie, and Michael McCarron. And first off, I love the Nick Foligno trade where it was kind of a respect thing from the Blackhawks of just letting his Foligno go play with his brother, pretty much setting to end their careers together. Just a respect thing overall. But this team building what they built, obviously with what they already have, but adding the pieces they did, bringing in somebody like Jeff Petrie, who's a veteran, Foligno, who's a veteran, somebody young like Bobby Brink, who you can slide in that second line, adding a piece like Michael McCarron, who's a great defensive center, adding him to your bottom six. I like these additions, and honestly, I think they became a really tough team to play, not just the rest of the regular season, but also come playoff time.
Yeah, my thing with Minnesota is that it seems like they brought a lot of character into their room. So I do like your choice of them being a winner. I feel like it's been forever since they did anything of note in the postseason. And for them to bring in a guy like Nick Foligno, who's, obviously recognized by the work he does in the room. He was named captain of a rebuilding Chicago Blackhawks squad. I really like that. And Minnesota, they have Billy Guerin and GM, who's, fresh off his high off of, GMing Team USA in the Olympics. And he's looking to keep that momentum going here. So, we'll see what Minnesota can do. Can they, keep pace with a loaded Central Division with Dallas and Colorado? They had to get meaner to prep for the playoffs. So yeah, I like your choice of Minnesota.
I look at this team and like you mentioned it right there of trying to compete with that Central Division, and I feel like they tried to counter-react to every move that the other teams that they're chasing were making. Like Dallas, who I'll go to it right now as my second winner, and with what they added, but like adding somebody like Dallas took in Michael Bunting and Tyler Myers, and it felt like Minnesota tried to, react to those trades and counter in their own ways. Because realistically, the way things are right now, and I don't really see it changing much, is that's your first round matchup in the playoffs. And so these are two teams that with, Dallas, like I said, bringing in Bunting and Myers, that they're just going to line up so well, and it's going to be best on best first. I honestly think 7 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Minnesota probably prioritized heaviness and truculence a little too much. I mean, there wasn't a lot of skill players out there. Let's be honest. It wasn't a tremendously exhilarating trade deadline, right? There wasn't a, big name that was available. So probably the biggest name that was available didn't end up even getting moved, right? Robert Thomas ended up sitting still. He stayed in St. Louis. And then, the rental who was sat for roster protection services and Vinny Trocheck, who was linked to the Minnesota Wild, that never ended up happening either. So I definitely think that if Dallas and Minnesota meets in the first round, I think Dallas probably takes it in 6. I don't think it'll quite go to 7.
I see that's where I hesitate because of the injuries that Dallas has. I mean, obviously we know Rantanen will be back, but not having Sagan for the rest of the season is a tough blow for Dallas. That's a big piece for them. And, getting Bunting can provide a little bit of that offense, but it provides more toughness for them. And I think Dallas has the better goaltender. So if you had to look at the two teams in a playoff series, which will obviously do come playoff time, assuming they both line up, I think I'd give the edge to Dallas over Minnesota. But honestly, looking at the two lineups, I mean, Kaprizov and Rantanen, they each have superstars in their own right. Defensively, I'd give the lean to Dallas, and obviously adding Myers, and he's a bottom 6 guy for them. That's a huge add. I mean, having a guy that, let me rephrase that.
Literally
pairing.
Huge.
Yeah, a big pairing, and he goes back home. I mean, he's from Texas, so I mean that's a big get for Dallas, and they got a guy that has a homecoming. So honestly, I like both moves. Interesting too, going back to Minnesota for a second, they were linked to possibly rumored to move Wallstead to get a superstar, and they end up keeping him. Something to watch there, I think, in the offseason for Minnesota, whether they move him or keep him. But again, I also look, we had talked, you and I think Conrad and I had talked about this with the Olympics and everybody looking at, their players in the Olympics. In Minnesota, I mentioned Gustafsson struggled. And I wonder if they saw that in the Wallstead thing and they said, okay, we're going to hang on to Wallstead in case this is what Gustafsson does come playoff time. And we have another reliable 1B option they can plug into the lineup if needed.
Yeah, I mean, anytime the postseason rolls around, and if your goaltender falters, you better have a backup option. Otherwise, your runway is going to end up running out real quick. So it's never a bad idea to have somebody else in the wings that can, handle that workload when the time comes. Because you've seen it countless times in postseasons where goaltending switch here and there can change the course of the momentum of a series.
Well, you said a word right there that leads right into my third winner of the trade deadline. That's the Detroit Red Wings. And honestly, this team, I like what they did. Being where they are in the playoffs, they're third right now in the Atlantic. They're trying to snap that skid of postseason, or I'm sorry, try to snap that postseason drought. But they bring in somebody, David Perron, who has won a Stanley Cup, has been in that locker room before. And I mean, you saw different players come out and talk about it after the trade of this guy meant a lot to us in the locker room before. And obviously he went and signed in Ottawa, but now they bring him back. And then they add, finally, after 3 years of conversation about this, a right shot defenseman that they very much needed. And it allowed them right now, Axel Sandin Pellikka has been sent down to the AHL, but right now it gives them a pairing of I'm drawing a blank there on the top line. It's Moritz Seider and why am I drawing a blank on the other pairing? But the second pairing is Sherratt and Falk, which two veteran defensemen right on your second pair, which is a huge addition. I'm not huge on the trade of Elmer Soderblom. Like that's a big body, but at the same time, you bring in Perron, who a veteran, like I said, and somebody that can be in the bottom six. And Soderblom was already a healthy scratch, so it made somebody expendable, and it just happened to be Soderblom. And they bring in a third round pick, which don't hate. And I mean, this was a trade deadline where you saw guys go and it involved a first round pick for guys who realistically I thought should not have been worth a first round pick. But what they gave up to get Justin Hall, Justin Falk, I'm not upset about. I mean, a first round pick, that kind of stinks, but giving up Justin Hall, you want to give up that contract. Dmitry Buchnell, God, I'm going to butcher this name, Buchelnikov. He's a prospect that hasn't come over here yet, and you don't know what he's going to be. Some people have said he's a project. So, okay, if he is a project, he's in somewhere else, and you got something that you needed for this year. And also, Justin Falk, worth noting, is under contract for next season as well. So it's not like he's a rental for what you gave up for a first and a third and two, and Hall getting Hall's contract off in, a prospect. So overall, I really do personally like the Red Wings moves, and last night you kind of saw it pay dividends as they shut out the Devils 3-0.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. I know we're on winners right now, but I'm not so fond of the Detroit Red Wing moves. So I'm going to save my feedback on this until we get to the losers section. So,
all right, so let's get right to your winners then.
All right, let's talk winners. I have a couple of winners that I'm going to specifically mention here. We're going to get started with the Colorado Avalanche. We're sticking with that Central Division theme here. The Central Division is loading up. Really, really liked it. The Avalanche kind of lived by the rich get richer mantra. And, and what was kind of a dud this trade deadline, they were able to light things up here right at the end of the buzzer when it found the news leaked out that, former Cup winner in 22 with the Avalanche, Nazem Kadri, was going to be moved off of the Calgary Flames over to Colorado. So that was really cool seeing Kadri go there, take over maybe the 3C or 2C role with an already incredibly deep Avalanche forward core. And then they also added Nicholas Roy, or Waugh, however you want to pronounce it, from Toronto. Waugh scored in his debut with the Avalanche. So once again, like the theme is for the Avs, the rich get richer here. So center core, McKinnon, Nelson, Kadri, Roy, that's disgusting. Like there isn't a team down the middle as deep as what the Colorado Avalanche are this year, and it's very, very impressive. And they weren't done yet. Either. I mean, they also added Kulak a little earlier and Nick Blankenberg. So they have that veteran grit now for a deep run. They gave up distant picks and prospects. They even got Calgary to retain on Kadri to facilitate the move. They were my one true winner this deadline, which was, really, really kind of cool to see. What are your thoughts on the Avs, Chris?
I had them also as one of my teams for a winner, but we had to pick 3, so I made the cut with them. I do, like you said, I like the fact that they have a lot of defensive depth with the addition of Kulak and Blankenberg. Like they have the option to roll out however they want to in the bottom pairing. Also, like you said, the center depth is just there. Like I'm not huge. I mean, obviously you had to give up something to get Kadri, but I didn't like the fact they had to give up Olofsson. I thought that was a great piece for them and really fit their bottom 6 scoring. But you had to give something up, and maybe that was part of the push to get Calgary to retain 50% of Kadri. Interesting how the timing worked out on this deal. Like it was after 4 o'clock. Everybody's kind of doing their thing, getting ready, like unwrapping from the day, and then all of a sudden this comes through. Like I was personally for me, I know the deadline was at 3. I'm driving home at 4:15, and I get the notification that Kadri's being traded. I'm like, I thought the deadline was at 3. I know there's always stuff in the queue, but how long has this been in the queue? And obviously, there's always that one deal that just comes in right at the end for somebody that you really like. Kadri's name was out there, and it had been rumored to all these different places, almost kind of like a package with Uyghur too, at certain times. But you kind of figure out, like we talked about, the couple of names that didn't get traded, and then Kadri comes out, and it's like, okay, this was the big name of the deadline, and of course, it happens to come at the end. And it's always seems to be like the team that's in the race for the President's Cup. I mean, the President's Trophy. Like last year was Vegas and last year was Florida, but it was the rumor. Marchand came out and everybody was like, oh, it's Vegas. It's Vegas. And then Vegas sends out that tweet of, hey, or sup, or whatever it was. And, everybody's like, oh, here they go. Here it comes. And then Marchand to Florida. And it feels like you get that every year, and this year it just happened to be Kadri. But overall, like you said, I love what Colorado did. I think they're scarier. Minnesota, like I said, too, when I said they were winners, they loaded up to try to compete, and Colorado said, hold on, hold my beer. I'm coming in with one more big swing.
Yeah, thanks for that PTSD moment with Marchand. That was great. Really appreciate that one, Chris. Yeah, I mean, it was cool. I actually heard a rumor, and I don't know how substantiated this is or not, but I heard a rumor that there was a trade actually vetoed by the league because it was officially submitted too late after the 3 p.m. deadline. So that's kind of interesting that I heard that. But anyways, any closing thoughts on Colorado before I move on to my second and final winner of the deadline?
I have one
Connor.
for you on Kadri.
Go for it.
It was reported earlier in the week that there was a deal to have Kadri traded, and it was rumored to be Colorado, and there was retention involved, and the ownership of Calgary stepped in and vetoed the trade. Then Calgary went and traded, Colorado went and traded for Waugh and gave up the first round pick. Then it came out that Nazem Kadri was going to be heavily disappointed if he was not moved at the deadline. And then at the very last moment, he was traded to Colorado with retention. Do you think that Kadri's wanting to leave and going to somebody in the media to write a story about him wanting to be traded by the deadline kind of forced Calgary's ownership's hand? Like, it seems to me they could have had a first round pick on the table before saying no the first time.
Well, I also wonder what kind of leverage the owners have after that point happens, right? I mean, as an owner, I'm not a free agent. I can't go sign with another team. My team is my brand. My team is my company. And if I hear one of my store employees doesn't want to be here anymore, why do I want you here? All right, you're going to go out to the media and say you don't want to be a member of the Calgary Flames. Well, screw you. I don't want you to be here anyway. Then get out of here. Like, you need to be an ambassador of my franchise. You're a leader on this team. I don't think it necessarily got that heated, but you put 2 and 2 together. I think there's definitely some meat on the bone to the point you just made.
Yeah, I think he kind of forced the trade at that point. I mean, like you said, how do you keep an employee here if he doesn't want to be here? And Colorado seemed to be the one team that just didn't want to stop trying. And so it got to that point of the buzzer beater, and it's, yep, here's the deal. Take it.
All right. My second winner from the deadline is going to my favorite team out west right now, the Anaheim Ducks. Like, just so much fun to watch this team right now. And what they did is they were burning the midnight oil by acquiring the greatest defenseman in a Washington Capitals uniform. You know, at least statistically, there's some arguments to be made about other players. But John Carlson, the Caps lifer, offensive defenseman dynamo, was acquired. And I know he's 36 years old. He's still putting up really, really good underlying metrics. And he's going to supplement a really young Anaheim team. And they didn't really have to give up a whole lot to bring him in. You know, they were able to get him without trading away their crown jewel prospects like McTavish or Mintyukov. And then he can just take over that role as PPQB1 and just keep racking up those points with that young stud forward core. So love the pickup there for Anaheim. I'm really eager to see what Anaheim's able to do this postseason.
Yeah, and I mean, you saw it with what the Washington Capitals players had to say after the trade. And, you know, you can see how much he meant to that locker room. And now he's going to a Ducks team who we've talked about on this podcast at endless amounts, that they have the youth and they have the veteran leadership. And now they get another veteran who has playoff experience, has won a cup, and it's a huge ad for them. I mean, I love what the Ducks did, and moving Ryan Strome off and getting that taken care of was another big thing for them. I think this team is built, and we're going to get to this at the end of the episode. I think that's the last topic I have on the list. We're going to get to the Ducks, but overall, I think this really makes them a scary team. And I hope, like, with the, you know, having the youth and they get that playoff experience and get it under their belt, maybe they ride some momentum. I mean, they have that veteran coach who has won a cup. I know how you feel about him. I know your thoughts. But at the end of the day, you know, they do have a pretty good team. And overall, say what you want about him, he's still a good coach, and he can win in the playoffs. And with this team, with this roster, they can be very scary come April and end of April, early all of May. I don't want to say June because I don't think they're there, but definitely in May they can make some serious noise.
Yeah, a team to keep an eye on. Like you said, I don't think that they're quite top dogs yet. They still have to go and beat the Dallases and beat the Vegases and beat the, you know, Colorados until you have that, you know, ability to make that claim. But yeah, Anaheim's a team to watch. But that's it. I just have two winners this year, so everything else just yeah.
Let's go on to the losers, and you kind of hinted at it already. So I'm going to let you take the losers to start. And you mentioned one of my teams was a winner for me, and yours, you had him as a loser. So let's start right there.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting here, and I get why you say that the Detroit Red Wings are winners. I mean, they're in a position to end that streak of, at least you're not Buffalo streaks, but that's a story for later on today, huh? Detroit, I felt like they should have been more aggressive. I felt like they should have been attacking players that are a little bit younger, that works with their core. I acknowledge that they landed Justin Falk, and he obviously addresses a big need for them organizationally. The price was high for a guy of that age.
Mm-hmm.
And a guy of that many minutes. He's got a lot of wear on those tires, man. Like, I'm very concerned. You know, it was rumored that the Boston Bruins were interested in Justin Falk as well. And every time I saw that, I was like, go somewhere else, please don't trade a first for this guy. And I was very pleased to see that it was the Detroit Red Wings that ended up making that transaction happen. But they gave up 2026 first round pick and a top prospect. I mean, I don't know how good. You already talked about him a little while ago. But a first and a prospect for a 33-year-old defenseman, that's a gamble. And then obviously too, you have the timing of Larkin's injury. Like, is this the right choice to go out and spend a first if we might not be able to have a fully up and running Dylan Larkin for postseason time? Like, I don't know. So that's why the Detroit Red Wings are one of my losers.
That injury came after the trade deadline already ended. I mean, it's March. The Red Wings struggle. They have a March curse. It's a known thing. If you follow the Red Wings, every March they just collapse. They did it a couple of years ago. They were in a playoff spot, came down to the last day, and they ended up not making the playoffs. And I think Washington got that last spot. And then, of course, I think everybody kind of said the same thing. We got Falk. They got Falk. It was finally we got that right shot defenseman. But then they go into the game Friday night against Florida, and Larkin leaves the game. And it's here we go again. And then, of course, they happen to be 2-1-1 this in March, which, again, March curse. But the 2 wins have come with John Gibson leaving the game with an injury and Cam Talbot coming in to finish it. So, I mean, take with that what you will. Like, is that just the thread we're going to have to go through to get through March of, hey, Gibson starts the game, plays 60 minutes, and then we'll go to Cam Talbot in the third, and that's how they're going to have to win games in March just to break that curse. But at the end, I think at the end of the day, looking at you mentioned a young piece that they could add to their core, but you look at what the price was this whole trade deadline of, again, somebody like Justin Falk, you had to give up a first. You look at Scott Lawton, I think that was a third for Lawton, but there was like other names out there. I think Nick Waugh had a second or something like that. It's tied to it, or a first. You look at names like that, and it's like you're giving up a first round pick for this guy, which nothing to not to knock the player, but at the same time, like that's a steep price. And you mentioned like a young piece like that. I don't know if you really want to give up multiple firsts for somebody like that. And I think that's where the hesitation comes in. Because honestly, if you watch the Red Wings cover the Red Wings or follow anything with Steve Yzerman, he hates trading picks. So like number one, seeing him trade a first round pick for Justin Falk, shocking. But at the same time, I think he kind of sat there and went, okay, it's time to do this. I don't think he wanted to give up multiple for a young piece.
Yeah, I look at that core that Detroit has, and I know I'm going to just keep talking about Robert Thomas because his name was so far out there.
Yep.
And it already came out that, he wasn't ever asked to move. He never asked for a trade. But St. Louis is blowing it up. And there's rumors of Kyrou. There's rumors of Thomas. Like, those are the guys that if I'm, Steve Yzerman, I want to grab those guys to pair up with my young core of Mo Seider and Dylan Larkin and the rest of the team that Detroit has that is really supposed to be on the upswing. They should be in the same boat that Buffalo's in right now, as far as I'm concerned, with how long they've been building this thing. So I don't know. Maybe the veteran presence on the blue line will be what they need to get them across that hump, but I don't know.
I have a random thought before we move on to your next loser. And I wonder, this is a hypothetical. This is something that just popped in my head, but I want to throw this out there. There was one name by the St. Louis Blues that was rumored to be traded, new start, done with them. And that's Jordan Binnington. And I wonder if, they didn't go to Robert Thomas and ask him about a move or anything like that, but I wonder if there was conversations about Robert Thomas and the Blues wanted Sebastian Cossa in return as a start of the package, but they didn't want to pull the trigger on that until they had a move for Binnington. And I wonder if that's a conversation they're going to tape, because the Red Wings and the Blues make a lot of trades together. I mean, they're just known trade partners in recent years. And so I wonder if that's a conversation tabled for the offseason, because I know that was the thing that came out after was Robert Thomas wasn't going to be moved more likely in the offseason. And so I wonder if that's part of it of, hey, let's make a deal with Binnington in the offseason. We're going to move him. And because the time there, I think this is his last season no matter what. And maybe he's moved and then they bring in Cossa and they have a 1A, 1B situation there. And potentially then there's a Robert Thomas move, because the Red Wings have a goalie prospect playing at Michigan State who everybody's raving about, and he's been great. I mean, Michigan State's the number one team in college hockey, or they were. They might be number 2 right now, but they're in the top 5 in the country in college hockey. And, they're part of their goalie. And he's coming to the Red Wings organization most likely after the college season ends. So that might make Cossa expendable, and that might be the conversation they had where it says, hey, let's talk about this in the offseason.
Yeah. All right. My next loser, we just actually talked about them a decent bit, the St. Louis Blues. So the St. Louis Blues were in a position where they really needed to make an organizational change. And you saw that with the rumored trade of Parayko, which I'm going to talk about in a second, that didn't end up happening. We saw it with, our friend Justin Falk getting sent out to the Detroit Red Wings. They were active sellers, but the execution was just so messy. I mean, for them to ask every one of their staffers in the war room to look at their phones and review their emails to see if they leaked the trade out to the public,
Yeah.
That looks bad. Like, you don't even trust your own internal employees. And then, it's one thing to do that and then to tell the media afterwards that you did it, or for that to come out to the media afterwards. There's problems in that room, man. Like, that war room should not be leaking that stuff out. So, really, really blemished look for the Blues for the Parayko deal coming out, ending up not even being finalized across the finish line. And then what about that pressure it puts on Parayko? How do you think that makes St. Louis Blues fans feel? Oh, the rumored return is pretty damn good, and now you screwed us, Colton, by not accepting this trade, which is his contractual right. As everyone has been very clear, there's no movement clause or no trade clause. He doesn't have to waive that. So it was rough. And then it came out afterwards that he would have accepted a trade elsewhere, which, no offense, Buffalo fans, I wouldn't want to live in Buffalo for the next 4 years either. So I'm not really holding that against Colton Parayko. Like, this wasn't a rental situation. This is a long-term commitment that Parayko is going to have to make. So don't like that. Don't like how the Blues handled that. And then, heavy rumors across other, players. Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, neither of these two guys move. Maybe they move in the offseason, but the best time to sell an asset when you're a rebuilding team, the prices are never going to be higher than the trade deadline, especially this trade deadline where we saw really middling assets. Like we've already talked about, Roy fetched a first. Like you could have gotten 2 firsts and a prospect, a roster player for Kyrou, for Robert Thomas. Like, you should have sold St. Louis. So St. Louis Blues are my second loser of the deadline.
Another name too that you mentioned there, and it's no goalies got moved to this deadline. What about Binnington? That's another name out there that was rumored to be on the move. And how do you again? It's one of those things like Parayko. I know he said no, but how do you go back to that locker room if you guys want to move me? I mean, I know you're rebuilding, but you got to make a deal now in the offseason because next season I don't know if I really want to be here. And I mean, you look at what they're doing all around the organization. They're just moving guys left and right, even the AHL level. Their leading point scorer down in the Springfield, Matt Luff, they traded him to the Bridgeport Islanders. And not for nothing, that's a team. I know the NHL and AHL doesn't really matter, but that's a team in the AHL that your organization is fighting for a playoff spot down there as well. And, you just gave your leading point scorer to him. No, I think that was a respect move more so than anything, where they're moving to Hamilton most likely after this season, and he's from that area. So that was more of a, yeah, we'll let you be closer to home. But overall, that I don't know what's going on with that whole Blues organization in general. Like, I don't know what their thought process was. And obviously, the fact, like you said, somebody had to come out and address, or leak to the media that somebody in our room's leaking something. And it's just a mess. I think you're going to see a giant overhaul in the offseason of not just players, but other people as well.
Well, if I remember right, I believe Alex Steen is taking over in this upcoming offseason.
Okay.
So there is going to be a transition in the front office with the GM being swapped over and the reins are being handed over to Alex Steen. So it'll be fascinating to see. This is a pivotal offseason for Mr. Steen. And it's going to be, cinema to see how the rookie GM handles this. Obviously, he's been, under the tutelage of his, the current GM over there. Who's the current GM of St. Louis again right now? Armstrong?
I think it's Armstrong. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's been there for a while. But hell of a first test there for Alex Steen. So, but yeah, that's why I've got the Blues as my second loser. Third loser, the New York Rangers. And the reason why I choose the Rangers, and I acknowledged with the Panarin trade, they didn't have a lot of leverage, right? Panarin only wanted to play for a couple of markets. He ended up, we talked about it already. He forced his deal over there. It was a little bit before the deadline. So, when you move a guy with that much talent, Panarin's the guy with the most talent that got moved at the deadline, bar none. And he got peanuts. You got nothing. Mm-hmm. So what do? You pivot to a guy, Vincent Trocheck, and you say, all right, Vinny, you're an Olympian. You played a really big role. He was, we're sitting you for roster management purposes. We're going to bring in a haul because you're the top asset available on the deadline. And you don't move him? You don't trade him? Like that? That's weird to me. It's just an incredibly befuddling choice by the New York Rangers front office. to not move Vinny Trocheck. And once again, maybe they have a plan in the offseason. It's not going to be as high of a return as what you're going to get at the trade deadline. So for those reasons, the New York Rangers are my third and final loser.
I stand with you on the Rangers. Oh, Connor, go ahead.
I want to hop in here before you give your take on the Rangers. A lot of the comments on some of these losers thus far have been players that they haven't been able to trade yet or weren't willing to trade. And I have a theory personally, and I think it's salary cap related. With all of the money being flushed into the league's salary cap system over the last year and a half, and then you have another 3 years going of $9.5 million each season, no team is running out of cap space right now to re-sign their players. So I think that some of the asking prices were held on because some of these teams would rather wait until the offseason where the return doesn't become a first and a prospect. It could become a regular roster player and a lesser prospect in a swap. And they're not necessarily trading as much for futures, but players that they would rather have from another roster and or an extra chance to get them in their system and lock them up long term.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go on the Trocheck thought for a second there too, and I want to say, like, with Panarin, he kind of handicapped the Rangers, and I think in a way Trocheck kind of did too, with saying, I just want to be on the East Coast. I wonder if there was a deal on the West Coast. And maybe like Connor just said, that is a deal they talk about in the offseason. And another name that did come out was, the Possetton was very, very slim. He was going to get moved, but Shesterkin's name was out there for a little bit as well. So you wonder if that's another name come the offseason, if maybe he gets the possibility of him getting moved. And the Rangers are certainly a team that they got to blow it up. And Panarin being gone, you got to expect there is more moves coming this offseason, and we might have the busiest offseason we've had in recent years. But the Rangers are a mess. And I agree with you. I mean, they really didn't sell off any pieces and bring in any assets that make them better to build off of. They keep calling up guys from Hartford, and Hartford's one of the worst teams in the AHL. I mean, you're not making yourself better. So, and I'm a big Jonathan Quick fan. So, moving Shesterkin and finishing the season off with Quick wasn't a bad move if you could get, 2 first-round picks for him. And there's teams out there that could use a goalie. But, yeah, I agree with you. The Rangers didn't do much. Do you have any other final thoughts before I get to my losers?
Nah, man, lose it up.
All right. My first loser is a team that I've talked about for weeks on end that they need to go do something. And that's the Los Angeles Kings. And I know we talked about they brought in Artemi Panarin. They didn't really give up that much to bring him in. But after they brought him in, now this is the last season they have with their captain. Anze Kopitar is retiring after the season. Then the Olympics happen after they get Panarin. And then they lose Kevin Fiala to an injury. He's done for the year. Then they come back, they play a couple games, and then Kuzmenko has surgery. And they need to go add somebody. You're fighting for a playoff spot. You need to go do something. So what do? They move Corey Perry to the Lightning, and then they trade Warren Fogle the night before the deadline to Ottawa. And the only addition they made was Scott Laughton. That was the only thing they brought in after Panarin. And I know Scott Laughton's a nice piece to have in the bottom 6, but you felt like with the moves they were making with Fogle and the pieces they brought back in, they were going to load up for something. And then nothing happened. It was just Scott Laughton, that's it. They were done. And that doesn't, if I'm Kopitar, it's my final season. I've been your captain for how long? And, we've won 2 cups. I'm going out like this. Celebrities, the Sharks are right there. And the Kraken are in a playoff spot ahead of them. And those two, the Sharks went out and they added some guys way before the deadline. And they got the young pieces that keep coming back from injury. But the Kraken went out and added, they got Bobby McMahon. But the Kings sat there and got Scott Laughton. That was your counter. It felt like they didn't make the additions needed to make that jump to be a playoff, to get one last run with their captain.
Yeah, I mean, the Kings are the Kings. I think I don't really have a lot to elaborate, and I think that we already talked about the whole you got to give Kopitar more back up there and help him out. And, obviously the GM of the Los Angeles Kings didn't think that any of the assets there were worth the picks that it would have taken. And maybe that was a realistic approach that they took. Maybe they didn't think that they had all the tools to go far. And is it worth shedding first round picks? So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Kings.
My next one, and this is one we've talked about, is the Edmonton Oilers. We mentioned last week that Connor McDavid's not going to be there forever, and he signed that extension. He's there for a couple more years, but if they don't go fix this, he's not going to stay there. He wants to be there. He's made that known, but if you don't build a team around him to win, then he's not going to stay. And they really did nothing to help themselves. They stood by what we talked about last week with not upgrading their goaltending, and that clearly still is not working out. It was last Monday we talked about it. The deadline was Friday, so they put a couple games between when we talked about it and when they made that statement, and they stood by it. They didn't do anything. They could have gotten a name we keep talking about, Jordan Binnington, and we've mentioned that he would be a perfect fit in Edmonton. He's a goalie that's won a Stanley Cup. He could be a goalie that fits there well. And what did they do? They went out and traded with the Chicago Blackhawks. That was all they did. Two separate trades. We talked about last week. They went out and got Connor Murphy, which we both agreed, great for their PK, great addition. But the other trade was they went out and got, Dickinson. They got Colton Dach. And those are great bottom six guys. They complement what they have well already. But, I mean, it felt like they could have done more to do right by Connor McDavid. And as Kachuk said at the Olympics, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right? So here we are, and the Oilers really, to me, right now they're sitting third in the Pacific. That could very easily fall to a wild card spot, and they could be having a date with the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the playoffs. I mean, or they could be on the outside looking in too. I mean, the Sharks are right there too. Like that whole Pacific division from the Ducks, Knights, Oilers, Kraken, Sharks, and Kings is a mess. And two teams in the Pacific that could have done more to, be that team to hold, the third spot, a wild card spot, didn't go do much. And, what they gave up is crazy to me. Overall, it's the Oilers should have done more. They're a better team. They've been to 2 cups. Like, they know what to go add. They know how to get to that hump and keep going. But they didn't go add those pieces. And to me, it's a step back this season from previous seasons. I wish, Connor McDavid's a generational talent. And him not getting the help he needs, I'd take that as a giant slap in the face if I'm Connor McDavid.
Yeah, I mean, they've gone in, I feel like, every offseason. And I think now it's probably the point where they say, hey, enough's enough. We've spent so many assets trying to supplement this core. And it's time for you guys to just get it done. So I hear you. I don't know. I also kind of am on the other side, like, just see how it goes.
Yeah. My other one, unless you have another thought, which I don't think you do. So we're going to go with the Carolina Hurricanes. And this is a team that I had talked about, covering the Hurricanes, looking at them. I don't think they really needed to add much, but at the same time, they needed something. They needed a bottom 6 scorer. And there was so many rumors, like we mentioned it with like Parayko and those guys. It's like, how do you say we're going to move you? We need to get your contract off the books, and then don't. And just Barry Kaniemi was a name that was linked to so many trades. Like, he was the contract they wanted to move off of, and all of a sudden they don't. So now he's just sitting there as a healthy scratch. Like, he's not even in their lineup when you could have gone and gotten like Danault, who they wanted earlier, and he ended up going to Montreal. There was other names out there that they wanted. They ended up coming away with the only trade was Nick Delorier, which physical player, great for their bottom 6, but doesn't provide any scoring, which is what they want in the bottom 6. And a piece that they have like Jackson Blake, fantastic, but they moved him up to the top 6, and that kind of handicaps you in the bottom half. Defensively, they lose Shane Gostisbehere, who's now day to day. Defensively, they could have used an addition. Like Nystrom and Nikishin have been great call-ups from Chicago this year. Obviously, we know Brandon Bussey, one of my favorites for the Vezina this year, and he continues to look great. Yeah, he's had his little hiccups outside of the outside of the Olympics, but they've been rotating. Frederik Andersen has looked good too. Like he's seemed to shaken off the early season stuff he was going. Like he just struggled in the first half of the season, comes back from the Olympic break, and he looks different. Overall, Carolina should have done a lot more, and they didn't. And again, I wonder if they put all of their eggs in one basket with Trocheck and they couldn't get a deal done. And then by the time, the Rangers said no and he wasn't being moved, they panicked. And now they got nothing. So the best they could do was Delorier, because that came in kind of like 2:00, I think.
Yeah, I do think that like Eric Tulsky, though, the GM of the Carolina Hurricanes, he is like a absolute spreadsheets wizard. So I feel like he's always one of the guys that are just like, I'm the smartest guy in the room. So I don't think he's ever going to go out there and make those trades at the deadline like other teams do, because he thinks he can do things in the offseason at a much cheaper rate than everybody else does. So that's kind of his MO.
The thing I love about Carolina, and like this is why I think they were linked to Trocheck, was last year you see them, they put their dick on the table, and they literally went out and got Mikko Rantanen in January when nobody expected that to come. And then what do they do with Rantanen? They flip him to Dallas and they bring in Jackson Blake. And Taylor Hall, and they brought in some other Logan Stankoven. I'm not Jackson Blake. They brought in Stankoven. And those two guys have just fit in well with that team. Like that's exactly what the Carolina Hurricanes need. The Hurricanes are not a superstar team. Like Eric Stahl was the last, like to me, off the top of my head right now, the last big superstar to that team. And he wasn't even really a superstar. He was just the player that fit the Carolina Hurricanes mold. Same with Cam Ward. Cam Ward was the mold, like the perfect goalie for the Carolina Hurricanes. And what happened with those two guys? They won a Stanley Cup. This team right now, to me, still a Stanley Cup team. Don't take me saying they're a loser of the trade deadline as they're not a Stanley Cup team. They are 100%, to me, still one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the Eastern Conference, especially with the way Bussey's played all year. If he continues that in the playoffs, and what they have in the top 9, I guess, of their forwards and their defense. They have the depth, like I said, with Nikishin and Nystrom coming up. They have the depth, and they still have a piece down in the AHL, Bradley Nadeau, a nice prospect piece that has come up a couple times this year and been great in the bottom 6. But if you went out and added one more piece, just not a big name, but like a name that could fit in well to be a goal scorer in your bottom 6, then you come away in a winner at this trade deadline to me, because you went away from being the best team in the Metro, one of the top teams in the East, and you made a statement. Now they got to match up. They've struggled with their play when they match up with Florida, and Tampa goes out and they bring in Corey Perry. Okay, so is Delorier your guy to go up with Corey Perry in the playoffs? Like, to me, it's just Carolina didn't make the full moves that they needed to be a winner in this trade deadline. And that's, again, I'm not saying not a playoff team, not a cup team, but they didn't make the move that screams, yes, this team. Because at the end of let me, I guess the better way I want to put this, and this is what I had in my note, was they made the move needed to win the Eastern Conference. They didn't make the move needed to beat any of those 3 Central teams.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. So on Carolina, I also want to add a thought here too. Like, I guess we're also kind of like looking at this maybe as a if it ain't broke, don't fix it type mantra. And you've already talked about how good they already are, right? I mean, Carolina leads the league in offensive zone time. 45.4% of the time they're in the offensive zone. They get the puck, they move it out of the defensive zone, they get through the neutral zone well, they have good zone entries, and they keep the puck in the offensive zone and go to work on the cycle. They're Corsi 4, so, generating shots compared to how many shots they're giving up. They are also in first in the NHL right now at 60.1%. So they are just controlling the puck. It is incredibly hard to force a turnover against this team. So, would bringing in a top 6 guy be nice, in a vacuum? Yeah. But how would that maybe disrupt some of the chemistry that they have in their top 9? How would that work? So I think there's a case for that as well.
That's why I have them third, not like towards the top of the loser list, but I mean, absolutely. And again, I look at Brandon Bussey's stat line. because I like to see what he did every night he plays. And a lot of nights it's just 18 shots on goal. And that just goes to show you the kind of play that the Carolina Hurricanes do have. But that's my third and final loser. You had your two. Now let's move on to a couple of storylines from the last week. And one big one, I think last night, we might have seen our game of the year in the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Buffalo Sabres. And this was a game that both teams, whoever came out with a win, no matter regulation or overtime, was in first place of the Atlantic Division. And it just had a playoff feel to it. And within the first 21 minutes, it was fighting. It was 1-0 Sabres after that point. And then all of a sudden, after this first 6 seconds after that last fight in the second period, it turned into an all-out muscle battle of who had the better goal scoring. And there was 14 goals put up after that time frame. So in the last 39 minutes, you had 14 goals put up. And I mean, it was just a great game overall. You had a little bit electric, you had a bit of everything. And Buffalo comes away with an 8-7 win. And overall, these two teams, I hate to say it, covering the Red Wings and following the Red Wings like I do, but these two teams meeting in the second round of the playoffs it would just be fantastic.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that they stormed out to a 3-0 lead, and then in typical Buffalo fashion, Tampa Bay came right back and tied it up. And it was interesting. I know it was 4-1 after that, but they allowed 5 unanswered goals to end up falling behind 6-4 to Tampa. And at that point, every Buffalo fan at KeyBank Arena were like, "Oh no, here we go again. We're gonna Buffalo it up." But they didn't, and that was, I think you hit the nail on the head. This was the most entertaining game of the year. I think one of my highlights, I saw a clip on Twitter this morning that I got to give my kudos to whomever is running the game day presentation there in Buffalo, because they were on the Jumbotron flashing from the penalty box for Buffalo, which was full of players, and the entire arena cheered, and it flashed over to Tampa Bay, and it booed, and they were doing it in quick succession. So you had yay, boo, yay, boo, yay, boo, and it was just hilarious to watch on that video. So that was cool. I love the comeback. Buffalo rallying from 7-5 down in the third. Jason Zucker tying it up on a breakaway. It was cinematic. It was storybook, this game. You just couldn't script a game more entertaining for that. If I was to find somebody who's never watched an NHL or a hockey game in general that are saying, all right, well, I don't really understand. I can't follow where the puck is. What's so special about hockey? I would retroactively plant their ass in a seat in that arena and make them watch that game, because that person's going to leave that arena as a hockey fan forever.
It was overall a great game. And the one takeaway I have is, the final was 8-7, and everybody played except for one goalie, and that was Andrei Vasilevskiy. And is that game 8-7 if Vasilevsky's in net for Tampa? Probably not. But overall, the electric factory of that whole game was beautiful. I mean, like you said, I sit somebody who doesn't like hockey down and have them watch that game. And the first, 20 minutes of that game, they're getting fights and they're getting physicality. And then next year, you're getting the next 40 minutes of pure talent from both teams. You saw what each team can do. And, I think Tuck had 2 goals. I think, Tage Thompson had 4, I believe. I know somebody on Buffalo had 4. I believe it was Tage Thompson.
4 assists.
Was it 4 assists? Okay, but overall, I mean, the game was just back and forth. I know I planned to watch it at 6. I got caught up doing something. I didn't tune in until probably the start of the third, maybe the middle of the second. But even still, that game was so fun to watch, and you just couldn't turn away from the TV when it was on. And like I said, I really do hope that this is a playoff matchup, because I think you're going to see obviously, the attitude is turned up a lot more come playoff time. But sticking with the Sabres, after last night, they're now in first place in the Atlantic Division. It was a huge turnaround for this team. I mean, they made moves up top, and all of a sudden this team turned everything around. They're now in first place. But here's the real question. Do we really think they are a Stanley Cup threat? Or is this just a hot streak like the Anaheim Ducks had earlier this season, and they fizzled out? will the Sabres start to fizzle out come April? Like, I mean, I think we can agree they're a playoff team, but come April time, is that when they hit the downhill slope and they start to fizzle out and they're all done?
Yeah, I mean, years in a row of missing the postseason for the Buffalo Sabres, and it looks like that drought, the longest in the NHL, older than that's a teenager. That's a teenage child that it's been around since the Buffalo Sabres made the postseason. So, yes, I think, and this has been said by many players, many analysts, many coaches, many managers. Hell, I said it to my mites that I coach. You have to learn how to lose before you can learn how to win. So these guys are going to face adversity they haven't seen. You know, Rasmus Dahlin's a veteran in the NHL. He's just a baby when it comes to postseason hockey. You know, all of these guys in Buffalo, they haven't been exposed to it. So it'll be fascinating to see it. I don't have money on them, you know, going far. I could see them win a round or two, but I don't believe that they're truly a contender status until they prove it in the postseason. You know, I think that they'll probably take their lumps. They'll face some adversity, and it wouldn't surprise me if they end up folding in the first or second round because of that lack of experience. But when that does happen, they're going to be equipped exponentially more for the following seasons because of the success that they've had this season.
I agree with you 100% right there. I think that they're going to take those bumps this year, but they're going to be a scary team in the future. And one thing I do want to mention is we talked, I've talked endlessly about Brandon Bussi, but I think it's also worth noting that part of Buffalo's turnaround this year, he hasn't been playing, he hasn't been dressed, he's been sitting up top. But that's Colton Ellis. That's a name that they claimed off waivers from the Blues. And when he's come in and played, he's been fantastic for them. I mean, we've talked about on this podcast a couple times of, you know, they got Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and they got Alex Lyon, but then they also have the depth of Colton Ellis who they can slide in if need be. And he's made a decent name for himself this year where, like, you know, I look at Thunderbirds fans down the AHL and they're pissed that, you know, he's not on the team anymore. And it's, what do you expect? The Blues didn't have a spot for him, and you know, Buffalo claimed him, and now Buffalo uses him as a depth piece when they need to, and he doesn't miss a beat. And they have a lot of goaltending. That's one thing about that Buffalo Sabres team is they have the depth in goal. Defensively, yeah, okay, they didn't get Parayko, but they added Luke Shen and they added Logan Stanley, two pieces that I think once they get into that lineup will be nice pieces for Buffalo. I also like the addition of Tanner Pearson, who again won a cup with the Kings. And you know, has playoff experience. That's same thing with the Ducks, and we're going to get to them in a couple minutes here. But you know, they have a couple of veteran pieces that they went out and added, and that could be beneficial to them to maybe avoid those hiccups in the first round or second round that could get them to win a playoff series and make things exciting. But again, I agree with you. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup team this year, and maybe we're talking mid-May and they're going to the Eastern Conference Finals, and we're okay. What is this team? Like, are we really, you know, getting ready for this team to maybe go to the Cup? But they're going to be an interesting team to watch.
Two closing thoughts on the Buffalo Sabres for me, and they're just going to be quick hitters. Number one, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has the coolest name in the NHL.
Yes.
Just bar none. Nobody's got a better name. Love that. Number two, can we just move Buffalo to the goat head jerseys permanently? Like, the black and red goat head just slaps. Like, that is one of the top jerseys, if not, you know, I'll say top 5 sweater in the NHL. And I've been abundantly clear that I hate everything Buffalo, but those jerseys are sick. And
those are
really
the best jerseys. The best jerseys.
The best.
Like,
the best.
And you know they know it because when they did the reverse retro a couple years ago, they used the goat head. They just did the current Sabres colors. But so they know it's the best jersey. Why not just go back to it permanently? I agree with you. Have the black, the white, and those red ones were sick back in the late and in the 90s. Those were sick. I mean, bring all those back. Get rid of what we're doing right now. Just bring back the goat head. I stand with you on that. And honestly, like watching a team like the Buffalo Sabres in the playoffs with the goat head on, even more electric than that game was last night.
Can you imagine like a blackout in Buffalo where everybody just wears black in the stands and, you know.
Oh, you know they'd be in the parking lot before jumping on tables. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that in Buffalo, in the nursing like units, like below the woman who's giving birth, there's just a little folding table. So those children just roll out. and then go through a table, and that's how
The
they come
first
into
thing they
the
do. The first thing they welcome. All right. Last final thought before, let's move on to the last topic, and that's the Anaheim Ducks, who are now in first place in the Pacific. I know you just said you love the Ducks, and right now they are in first place by 1 point, and they have 1 game in hand on both Vegas and Edmonton behind them. They have 3 points ahead on Edmonton. This team's been a roller coaster all year. I mean, they were one of the hottest teams out of the gate, and one of the top teams in the Western Conference, obviously behind Colorado and Dallas. But now they're back up there. They add John Carlson. Is this team? Do we think this team can make the Western Conference Finals?
I mean, why not? Anything can happen in the postseason, and I've made it abundantly clear that this is my fun team to watch. The youth explosion is real, and if you haven't paid attention to the Anaheim Ducks, because let's be honest, I'm an Eastern guy. I don't have a lot of time to watch 10 p.m. games my time. So when I go and watch the highlights or the Ducks are going out east, this is a team I love to watch. You got Leo Carlson, 21 years old. Cutter Gauthier, 22 years old. You've got Beckett Seneke, 19 years old. Like the youth movement is in, and then they're supplementing it with veteran players. They're aggressively all in managerial now. Like they're making the moves to add to this team to supplement their players. And honestly, every game they're in is really entertaining because they don't know what they're doing defensively yet either. So it's usually high scoring, very bad defensively. And then you've got Radko Gudas, who wants to kill a guy every time he's on the ice. So it is just so much fun to watch. And then you probably have one of the best goaltenders in the entire NHL in Lucas Dostal. Like, Dostal is an absolute stud. And I'd probably put him like top 10 in the league right now on goaltender. So it's just a recipe for entertaining hockey, and we'll have to see if they can overcome the defensive woes in the postseason. But I think that they could maybe outscore their mistakes.
Yeah, I would say Dostal is very underrated. Like, you don't hear him talked about at all, other than you just going on right there about him. Like, that's really the most you hear about Lucas Dostal. I agree. I think he is top 10. I think he's very underrated, needs to be talked about more because he's a big reason the Ducks won as many games as they did last year. I mean, I know they had John Gibson there, but Dostal took over that 1A situation. I mean, realistically, last year, Dostal Gibson was hurt. Dostal got the start in a lot of games. And then realistically, when Gibson came back, it made him expendable. And they were ready to roll with Dostal. And now here he is this season. He's proving why. And he's kind of, like you said, with the defense left out to dry in most games. But he's still making this timely saves that he needs to make to help them win games. And offensively, they are so fun to watch. I mean, you mentioned Seneke as a name people scratched their heads at when he was drafted, and he's burst onto the scene this year. And honestly, if it wasn't for Schaefer having the season he could very well be in the conversation for the Calder. But the rest of it, I mean, just the experience they have. Like you didn't mention Chris Kreider. Like, they have the youth. The youth is fun to watch, but then having somebody like Chris Kreider, and you mentioned Gudas and Trouba, and then you add in John Carlson defensively, like, this team is going to be a lot better to watch in the next couple of months. That playoff time, I before the season, I said Vegas was hands down the best team, I thought, in the Western Conference, but definitely the Pacific. And now Anaheim is I think Anaheim could go toe-to-toe with Vegas in a 7-game series. I think it would be a high-scoring 7-game series, but I think they can go toe-to-toe in a 7-game series.
I think it'll be interesting. And there has to be, I think, some dialogue around Vegas as well. Like, how much of this is them, we've been there, we've done that, we don't need to take these games at this point in the season super serious and get ourselves injured. We'll turn it on when it counts in the postseason. Now, I know that's, playing a dangerous game, because if you don't turn it on all season and then you try to turn it on in the postseason, it may not be there. You may have a misfire on that engine. But, the pedigree, the championship pedigree is there for Vegas. So maybe they are just biding their time. Maybe they're just, slowing down and, getting off the accelerator a little bit while they're taking these last few laps of the season. And then, hey, when it's white flag of the race, they're going to put the pedal to the metal again. So this Pacific race will be absolutely fascinating to watch. And, hey, my Duckies over there, you guys are doing a hell of a job. Keep it up.
One thing you mentioned with Vegas, and I saw this tweet the other day, and I actually laughed, And it was, it's spring, and it's somebody quote tweeting the Vegas Golden Knights putting Mark Stone on IR. And I thought that, Matt, that's fitting for Vegas. Vegas to me this year, and this is why I think the Ducks can really make a run to the Western Conference Finals, is Vegas feels different this year. Like that goal, like Aiden Hill was last year like one of the best goalies, lights out. But to me, it just feels like he's off this year. Like there's a reason they went out and signed Carter Hart. Like they didn't trust him or something. And now Carter Hart's injured, so like now it's Aiden Hill, and they've had Akira Schmid, and Lindbaum's been up from Henderson. And it's just been a mix and match goaltending wise all year for them. And I think that's part of the issue. We talked about Edmonton and their goaltending issues. Like my one hiccup with this is getting Utah in the first round for any of those teams. And Utah realistically is a dominant team in the Central. They're only a wild card team because of the three teams ahead of them. Like that's it. Utah is scary. And they added Mackenzie Weegar at the trade deadline too. So they got scarier, and again, Utah, part of the reason why I also think Utah had their little hiccup was they were out without Logan Cooley for a while. So like, is that the other thing that you said with Vegas? Like we've been there. Okay. We've done that. And then they kind of look at it and go, wow, you know what? I'd rather Edmonton in the first round, not Utah. And, avoid that whole thing until the second round, let Utah burn out against Anaheim, because Utah's kind of the same thing. They haven't been in the playoffs, but all those guys from Arizona also don't have much playoff experience. Vishmelka is one of the best goalies to me this season, on like hands down, and should be a Vezina candidate, if not the Vezina winner. But I mean, that's kind of the way I look at this. Is whoever wins that Pacific is heading into a bloodbath against Utah in the first round of the playoffs. So what do you want? You want Edmonton, who didn't do much, and I have them as a loser in the trade deadline and didn't add to that Connor McDavid. Yeah, granted, you have to play Connor McDavid. Or do you want Utah in the first round?
Yeah, that's a difficult choice, and I think you hit the nail on the head too with Utah. Like it's kind of like Anaheim for me, like a really fun young offensive team. You've got, I guess Keller's not that young anymore at this point, right? He's almost like 30, but I feel like he still is like a young kid to me. It's just, and I know that Utah's trying to really create a fun and entertaining brand. They're the newest team in the NHL. They're trying to sell tickets, and obviously Ryan Smith, the ownership team over there, are having a good time with that so far. They just got awarded the Winter Classic next year too, I think, or was it? It is the Winter Classic, yeah, and that's going to be fascinating to see. So it's not going to be a path. I think that obviously the Western Conference is the much stronger conference this year. That Central Division is going to be a bloodbath. The Pacific Division is a little bit easier, but still not easy. It's going to be a fascinating whole thing to watch here as the season comes to an end.
I tweeted out the other day, I don't know if you saw it, but I said, how fun would a Sabres and Utah Stanley Cup final be? But then thinking about it, like if the Sabres wore the goat head jerseys and Utah with their jerseys, that would be such a fun jersey Stanley Cup. Like two sick jerseys. Like I love the Utah Mammoth jerseys. Those like powder blues with the Mammoth head. Oh,
I love their home.
So nice.
The
blues.
Yeah. The aways are like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Like you guys came up with a logo and then you decided to not use it on the away jerseys?
Or throw the black jerseys on there, like the black Utah jerseys, and then have the Sabres wear the white goat heads. Now that would be sick. That would be a lot of fun. But we'll have to see. We got a lot of hockey to talk about. Do you have any final thoughts before we send this off for another week?
My final loser. I'm going to go back to losers real quick. The final loser from this week's trade deadline was us, the NHL fans. It was really waiting for a little more fireworks. I could only watch so much more of that garbage that they had on the trade deadline shows where they were just like throwing shit against the wall to try to keep people entertained when there was like only a minor league deal for the first hour and a half. Thanks, Boston. It's always more fun when it's a very active deadline and there's big names moved and a lot of picks thrown around, and it just was a bit of a snoozer. So the NHL fans, you are my biggest losers of the trade deadline. But Chris, it was awesome chatting today. Happy to do it next week. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree with you. My final thought, I'll go double off you right there. The fact that if you watch any of those, one of them had a what was it, like a lottery, a mock lottery. Oh God. So, yeah, always fun to talk hockey. I hope everybody has a good week.
Peace.